Good morning. This is Dan Way with the Office of State Treasurer. Welcome to the March 2021 Ask Me Anything teleconference. This is the Treasurer's opportunity to tell you what's on his mind and your opportunity to ask him what's on yours. So without further ado, we'll allow the Treasurer to have his opening remarks.
Thank you, Dan, and thank everybody for putting this call together, and thank you for joining us. Just very briefly, I just gave a small update to the Council of State. Pension plan continues to be hovering around the $116 billion level. We continue to be in the check delivery business, paid out about $550 million in gross benefits last week. That was for one 30-day period. We just lowered the assumed rate of return to 6.5%. I'm only the second treasurer in 62 years who has done that. Why should you care? The reason you should care is that this assumed rate of return that we were assuming has not been adjusted, has not been earned on average for 22 years. On the state health plan, we have expected to incur nearly $200 million worth of actual expenses for the testing and treatment and now the administration of the vaccine for those that teach, protect, and serve. We have not gotten reimbursed from that. And as a fiduciary, I have a loyalty and duty of care to those in the state health plan as well as the pension plan. And we're going to do everything it takes to get reimbursed for those actual expenses, many of which were mandated on us by the federal government. As far as the NC Cash, we just crossed the $1 million mark on our new pilot project, which I think was voted on unanimously in the General Assembly last year. NC Cash Match is a part of NC Cash. It's where we're trying to identify, we have identified over 1.2 million people who have less than $250 in NC Cash. And if the name is Dale Folwell, he's lived at the same address 28 years, and all of our databases point to the fact that Dale Folwell still lives at this address. We're sending out a letter. If that letter is not returned to us in 8 weeks, then we automatically send the check without any further bureaucracy or red tape or paperwork. So we're very excited about that. It was a pilot program that we hope that will continue being a pilot program. And to put this in some context, it's $250 million of NC Cash. So nearly a quarter of $1 billion is for claims of $250 or less. So with that, we have an LGC meeting later this afternoon. If you watch the Facebook Live of the Council of State, I sort of held up this picture of a small town in Nebraska where the town hall was this little cinder block building that was about 16 square feet. And the LGC is dealing with huge financial pressures that were not acts of God or acts of COVID, but acts of a lot of things that have been happening over the last 20 years in our local government. So we continue to work for the League of Municipalities, County Commissioner Association, and the School of Government, and the legislative delegations from these communities to figure out what's right, get it right, and keep it right for the future. So with that, Dan, we'll take questions.
Thank you, Treasurer. I'd like to throw it open now to questions. I know we have several folks on the line here, so anyone who wants to go first, please go ahead and ask your question. Identify yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is Paul Wolverton, USA Today Network, and regarding the program, what are you all doing to? Have you had any instances of, fraud or potential fraud when the checks went out?
Paul, thank you for your question and your interest. And by the way, Paul has been doing some research about how this impacts Cumberland County and the surrounding areas and the amount of checks that we've sent out to Cumberland County. And right now we have no instances of fraud. We do have about 10% of the checks that come back to us as undelivered. 10% of the letters. And let's be clear, Paul, when we send a letter and the letter comes back to us, then we take it out of NC Cash Match, because obviously that's a bad address. So my point of saying that to you, we're having about 10% of the letters that come back as undelivered. Not the check, the initial letter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Paul, by the way, it wouldn't be fraud is possible in every part of our aspects of our life, but generally speaking, this is money that people didn't know was there. That we are not to use the word offend, but we are playing offense. We are sending them a letter of something that they were unaware of. So it'd be pretty hard to fraud us on something that we're initiating the process.
Yeah, I was just wondering if someone might be at the address who's not supposed to get the check who might take it. I don't know how you would know though. Why not? How come you aren't perhaps working with the Department of Revenue and just doing like if they've been paying income taxes, just doing a direct deposit to their bank account?
That's a good point. We're one of the few in the United States that's even launched something like this. So we're always interested in new information or a better way of looking at old information. The challenge there, and if I say it, then it's public, but there are occasions where people may file or may be filing for the last time their joint tax return, but they're no longer married. And the NC Cash entry is in one spouse's name or the other. And so I've been happily married 33 years, so it doesn't apply to me. But but I just want to say that would possibly be an unintended consequence. But it's a great suggestion. But it leads me to think where I thought you were headed with that, Paul, is simply that we need to make sure that we're utilizing all the databases, for example, the Department of Revenue, as we're trying to match up addresses and people.
And are you running into instances where the person has passed away? And then how do you deal with that?
Absolutely. I would say that when these 10% of the checks are, I need to quit saying that. When 10% of the initial letters are coming back to us, it's mainly because the person no longer lives there, and passing away would be the biggest reason why people no longer live there. And but we've been unable to dissect how that happens. And just to be clear, we have 15 million entries at nccash.com. We have 10 million citizens, some of which are children. So obviously there are a lot of people in there that are deceased, and we're not there yet, but we are working with the Clerk of Courts Association and the Administrative Office of the Courts to see what we can do to expedite the reopening of estates in an efficient and cost-effective way, especially when somebody has the only thing left in the estate is something at NC Cash that they found out about 6 years after the estate was closed.
I've got more questions. I'll give someone else a turn if they want to turn.
All right. Well, thanks, Paul. Those are good questions. We appreciate that.
We're going to come back to you.
Okay.
So we'll open up for other questions. Anyone have something for the treasurer?
You guys come back to me?
Yeah. We have had some people who said they're going to be amphibious this morning and try to listen to this and a couple of other calls of things that are going on. Specifically, I think Blue Cross is having a press conference on their earnings release. There's things going on with the legislature, and so Paul, the floor is all yours.
All right. Well, why cap it at $250? Why not just return all the money?
I think I have the responsibility that when somebody asks me a question like that I don't know the answer to, that I just come right out and say it. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know how we came up. I think $250 and less represented the biggest strata, the biggest of tranche of of the entries, and I think that, and once again, just to be clear, let's say we send out 5,000 letters per week. That means that 500 of those letters are going to come back. And then when those 500 letters come back, they have to be manually gone. We have to manually go in and remove them from NC Cash Match. So we're trying to start out like we're going to hold out in terms of this whole process. I mean, we'd love to send out 10,000 a week, but as our agency's been, like many others, have been working remotely, we just got to be able to. We start out with 500 letters a week, and then we went to 1,000, then 2,000. So we're just trying to start it out and find more ways to make it even more efficient. But at the end of the day, we can pretty much estimate that 10% of these letters are going to come back undelivered, and something has to happen with those letters. They just can't pile up, because what happens if somebody goes into nccash.com to file a claim when we have sent them a letter that they didn't know anything about? So it's, as I said earlier, we're trying to start out like we're going to hold out, and to make sure that there's no unintended consequences.
Yeah, I'm getting a little technical. What if the person has died and the family receives the letter and the family wants to get that money back into the estate? Is there anything? Do they just collect the check, or do you do anything different?
They just collect the check, because we would have no idea that this person is deceased, and
Okay.
I will add that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not your question, it's not your topic, and may not ever be on your mind, but and I'd love to have a different word for this, but in retirement services we have something called death team, and the death team processes the death certificates of those that teach, protected, or otherwise served who have passed away as part of the teasers, elders, or the state health plan. So the death team is, as you can imagine, is covered up right now. It's covered up for lots of reasons, but one is COVID. The second reason is, and I'm part of this group, there's just a hell of a lot of people that were born between 1948 and 1962, and some of them, unfortunately, are passing away. And so how we deal with people who have passed away, whether they have something at NC Cash or they're a participant in these retirement systems, is very important to us, because some of these retirees, not all, had a death benefit of $10,000, and the death benefit is what funeral homes need to pay for services, and funeral services happen very quickly, and the funeral homes want to be paid quickly. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we are processing these death claims as quick as accurately and as quickly as possible.
And that's totally separate from this program, right?
It's completely 100%.
Okay. Hey, so again, it might be a little technical. So, like, say a person might have in you call it a sheets fund, right? Like, they might have, say, $90 from one person who, they forgot to collect the deposit on the utility bill 15 years ago, and then another $100 here and $30 there, and it adds up to more than $250. Do you send like one letter for each little chunk of it, or do you total it up and send them a letter?
Number one, I used to stutter, so I've been advised not to use that word you just used on the air, so because it could come out wrong. And but to directly answer your question, each entry has its unique identifier and its unique claim.
Mm-hmm. So you might get 3 letters if you got 3 things in there.
Yeah, Paul, can somebody write this down? we need to change this letter at the earliest opportunity to say that you may, Paul, I'm just talking out loud. We need to change the letter to say at the bottom, and there you could have other claims, you could have other entries at nccash.com. So please go to that. That's a great. Thank you for triggering that, Paul. It's a good idea.
Okay, well, I'm glad to help. And I guess if they added to more than 250, that wouldn't preclude them from getting notified because you break it down to little pieces. So okay.
Yeah.
All right. When people have collected their checks, have you gotten any response from them, either saying, "Is this real?" or like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful," or what have you heard from the public?
I had a couple of nephews who helped me with a big 110-foot oak tree that came down in my yard while I was in Raleigh, and we were trying to clean some of it up on Friday, so we went out to eat lunch, and out of nowhere, both these people had friends who had gotten something from NC Cash Match. Just think of the randomness of that. So my point is that we're hearing all over the place that of people who are getting these checks and are appreciative of it. I speak to Rotary clubs occasionally, and I just had an email last week. This was not NC Cash Match, but from the Southport Rotary Club, I think, where the guy had $1,580 at NC Cash, and he took a picture of the check and sent it to me and said, "Thank you for mentioning this." So.
Okay.
And by the way, Paul, there's 115 Rotary clubs that have money in NC Cash in North Carolina, or something like that. I mean, it's a million. There's $1 million that belong to churches. I mean, it's hospices, it's baseball teams, it's the Panthers, it's all the above.
Wait, so it's not just individuals; it's corporate entities.
Yes, I was. I have a mental health appointment every week that I can make it in Winston-Salem at the Honda Winston-Salem motorcycle shop where I worked for 6 years. I go out there just to remind myself of what my life used to be like and to see a bunch of old friends. And I was there last Saturday at the little receptionist desk. I didn't know any of the people standing there except the receptionist. And 3 of the 5 people standing there had something at nccash.com, including a veterinarian.
Treasurer? Yes, sir?
This is Gary Robertson.
Hey, Gary.
Hi. I know it sounds like Paul has a line of questioning. I wonder if I could just ask something unrelated, and then Paul can get back to what he wants to talk about. Is that all right, Paul?
Sure, thanks.
Okay, the only question I had, Treasurer, thank you, is what's going on with the debt affordability study? I guess it was supposed to be due by the February 1st, and then it was pushed back to March 1st, and I still don't see it. Do you have an ETA for that?
The next 24 hours.
Okay.
And it wasn't pushed back by us. It was pushed back because of the consensus forecast numbers that are put together jointly between OSBM and the legislature. The last consensus forecast numbers that we were able to bake in were from May, and as you've reported on exhaustively, the revenue numbers back last May were far billions of dollars more pessimistic than the new revenue numbers. So we just need the debt affordability study has always been ready. All we needed was that one number in order to put in the oven, and we put it in the oven last week. We just had a debt affordability commission meeting where we approved the debt affordability study last week, which included the OSBM director, a public meeting, and it'll be issued in the next 24 hours.
Great. We'll be looking for it. That's all I needed. Thank you. Good talking to y'all.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, Gary, this is Frank. I'll give you a heads up when it's ready, all right?
All right. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah,
See you.
man.
Bye.
All right.
Okay.
So then, I don't know. Have you heard anybody? There's so many scams going around. Has there any people saying, that they didn't believe it at first? They thought it was someone trying to steal their money.
I have not heard that. And you mean somebody trying to steal?
The person who received the letter thinks that it's a scam.
Yeah, I mean, I would think anybody on this call that'd be their initial. But when we have the seal at the top, my signature's at the top. When we have a direct phone number that comes into the treasurer's office as well as an email address, I think we've done all that we could to relieve that as an issue.
Okay. Change the topic a little bit. It's been about a year since you had COVID. How are you doing now?
I've got the energy of a teenager. I did not realize until recently when I had a debrief with some of the attending physicians at the end of 2020 about how serious my illness was. They had some questions for me. I had some questions for them. But I'm only sitting here by the grace of God and the prayers and support of my family and the caregivers who were in intensive care unit at the time, who really didn't know what to do with people like me. I'm not revealing anything that I don't want to, but my blood ox level was 84, and I was on 8 units of oxygen. That's not, and
Oh my goodness.
and but I was alert the whole time, and I grew up in that hospital. My house that I rented, my mother and I rented, was where that helicopter lands at that hospital. I was the paper boy at the hospital. I ate all my meals at that hospital. My mother was a switchboard operator at that hospital, and my ability to recite all the different evolutions of the Wake Forest Baptist Hospital over the last 50 years, how many different times the emergency room entrance has changed, what vegetables used to cost in the cafeteria, just my continuing to talk and to be able to articulate and have that kind of memory with my blood ox level being that low was probably what gave them some comfort that I was going to hopefully pull out of this. But there are I went in Sunday and so Monday they turned my bed around, and they turned my bed around because I was analyzing all the screens that were ahead of me. As you can imagine me doing that. And they could tell that as I was analyzing the screens, my blood ox level was falling. And so they turned my bed around so I couldn't analyze the screens anymore. Unfortunately, when they turn your bed around these are very unique ICU units. They each had a little ante room in them where people would put on the hazmat stuff. So it was like a sliding door, and then a little hazmat room, and then another sliding door. When they turn your bed around, obviously you're looking out into the hallway. And I saw a lot of people on each side of me that were not ever going to leave that building who had COVID-19. And we now know, based on what is officially called my medical obesity, that's what people like me like to call it, based on that and my age and my A negative blood type, that I probably had a 15% chance of surviving that.
The doctors told you that?
Yes. Based on what they couldn't, not in March, but because nobody, imagine what they were doing to folks. I was in the emergency room for 31 minutes. That's how acute this was. They immediately gave me Z-Pak and hydrochloroquine, which I barely ever heard of. As soon as I was being wheeled up to the intensive care, they were turning people over on their stomach. They were short on ventilators. I mean, just imagine the chaos that was going on with the uncertainty of how to actually treat this illness back in March. And I was one of the early ones. And as Muhammad Ali used to say during the end of his life, don't focus on how many days you got. Don't count the days, make every day count. And that's what I've attempted to do since then. And that's a long answer.
Are you kind of like one of they call them like long haulers, where it lingers for months? Are you still feeling effects now?
I don't. I have always had this little cough. Gary was on the call earlier, and other reporters. For as long as they've known me, I've had this little cough, and part of the cough comes from the fact that I used to stutter, as I mentioned earlier, and I was taught by a School of the Arts voice coach. I didn't attend the School of the Arts, but the fact that I wasn't breathing enough through my diaphragm, and that was resulting in my stutter into some respects. And so sometimes when I'm catching myself to stop from stuttering, it makes me kind of clear my throat a little bit. And those are the thing that you hear in my voice right now is as my wife has said, she's known me 35 years, and I've had it ever since she's known me. So, but as I said earlier, I'm blessed to have the energy of a teenager. I'm reminded of things that I think are important to everybody in this room and everybody on this call, is that there is a mental health aspect of COVID that is not really apparent right now. And all I can say is that motion creates emotion. And the more motion that we can put our bodies and our mind through, the better mentally we're going to feel about things. Motion creates emotion.
Uh-huh. Gotcha. I know some people report memory problems. I don't know if you encountered anything like that.
Well, let's get a vote from the people in this room. Are y'all experiencing any memory problems with me?
No.
Okay.
Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
Gotcha. Okay. When you said you were on 8 liters of oxygen, was that like with a tube down into your lungs, or just like a mask?
Mask.
Okay.
Or no.
Uh-huh.
In ICU, it was mask and tube up the nose.
Ooh. Okay.
I mean, that sounded a little bit more crude. The little, it looks like almost like a mask you wear right now, except instead of a cloth mask, it just goes around your ears, and then it has tubes that put oxygen in your nose.
Oh, they didn't stick it all the way down in. I got you. Okay.
The nasal pillows.
I know what you're talking
Nasal.
Yeah.
Pillows, they call them.
Yeah, nasal pillows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you're better, and thanks for the time this morning. If anybody else, I kind of monopolized the questions. Anybody else? I guess they want to jump in.
Thanks, Paul. We appreciate the interest, and I heard some other folks chime in here since we've been on the phone. So, if anyone else has questions, please go ahead and ask. If not, we'll have the treasurer do his closing remarks.
Well, thank you for your interest. I know that there's a lot of other things going on in the news today, and Paul, I will close with your line of questioning by saying that nobody knows why certain people survive or don't survive COVID. All I can tell you is it all sucketh, and I was trying to be spiritual when I said that. But fighting your way through it and understanding the some of the consequences. I didn't say this earlier, Paul, but the biggest problem I had when I got out of the hospital was coughing, and I will say this, that I got so frustrated, and I'm not a medicinal person, but everything they tried to give me to cure my cough just wasn't working. And finally, I had a chief medical doctor call me, and was something very shocking, and I think it'll shock you. And he said, Mr. Folwell, he said, do you know how a sword swallower stays in business? And I said, I think about a lot of things as the state treasurer, but that's not one of them. He said, a sword swallower stays in business by training his mind, because women are too smart for this, by training his mind not to cough, sneeze, or laugh while performing. I said, what does that have to do with my cough? He said, your body has been training your brain to cough for 6 weeks. And it's going to take a while for that to be deprogrammed. And he was right. So a lot of this, when your body is trying to get your mind to cough, to get this stuff out of your system, that's sometimes it just becomes habit. And that was a very valuable piece of information.
Were you having trouble breathing while you still had the cough?
I was asymptomatic. I never, ever had loss of taste or smell, GI issues, headache, or shortness of breath. Ever.
Oh.
I was as asymptomatic as the Webster's Dictionary would define it.
But you just weren't getting the oxygen in.
I said shortness of breath, right?
I asked about trouble breathing, but because your blood ox was really low, and I thought that might have been related to having problems breathing. My girlfriend's got it. She got it in January, and she's still having breathing problems. And I was wondering if your experience was similar.
Tell them to hang in there, and I'm a big proponent of using ice chips with some 0-calorie Gatorade and water, and just if you keep something, just keep your throat and your mouth just occupied, with ice chips and things like that. I think that also helps to calm the mind, reduce the anxiety, and a lot of anxiety is caused by increased temperature, and I mean a lot of coughs caused by anxiety, which increases your heart rate and increases your temperature, and just keeping something cold and little ice chips in your throat from time to time, I think will help all that.
Okay. All right.
Oh, the last thing, my initials are DR, Folwell, which does not stand for doctor, it's Dale Robbins. But the other thing is, and I just saw my doctor last week, and he prescribed gabapentin to me, which was very unique to help the cough, and it's shown it was like number 20 on the list, but it ultimately did work for me. Something called Gabi. I'm not pronouncing it right, but they call it a Gabi as a short. But she may want to check into that. Gabapentin.
Gabapentin. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Well, with no further ado then, we will close out this session. And thank you all for attending and for your questions. And we'll see you next month.
Am I going to get